I want you to just take a second here and just think about when you first fell in love with your spouse and what that looked like. I feel like a lot of times we get lost in the day to day, and especially this really busy time of year around Christmas time, where we kind of forget who we married, right? Like, hi, remember me? We're still married, right? So I want to just paint a picture here. I remember when Shane and I were first married, and what that looked like. We usually had full one-on-one conversations, eye contact. We texted throughout the day. We asked each other questions, quality questions, right? There were all of these things that just made the spark really exciting, right? And I remember years ago, we kind of lost that a little bit. It was like, oh my gosh, like we're just busy with kids and life and businesses and work and at the time school and all the things going on. And it was very much felt like, okay, we're just kind of living our lives very parallel to each other instead of building this marriage that we really wanted to have. And so we just thought through, like, what are some of those things that we could do to keep that spark alive like it once was when we were dating or first married? And some of those things, like I said, were that full eye contact, were those quality questions. But most importantly, it was date night for us. And so that's what I want to talk about today. One of the main things when I was researching and planning for this is the University of Virginia talked about couples who engage in regular date nights are 3.5 times more likely to report being very happy in their relationship than those who do not go on these date nights. And so I want you to raise your hand if you're like, okay, I would love for my relationship to be 3.5 times more happy than it is right now. So that's what we're going to dive into today, that date nights aren't just about dinner and a movie. It's actually about creating intentional space where you can connect with your spouse like you did once, like you did before, like you did when you were first had that young love, right? That can happen again and you can reconnect in that way. Other research shows that regular date nights improve communication, increase intimacy, and even reduce the likelihood of divorce. So I don't know about you, but those are all things that are super important to me in my relationship. So when you're both busy, it's so easy to feel like you're operating two separate ways. You're both CEOs of your businesses or your home or a mix of both. And so date night is what helps you step back into and focus on your marriage instead of that ongoing to-do list that we never seem to get all the way through. I want to talk to you about the systems of making date night a reality. The first thing for us was choosing a day that we're going to do every single week. For us, it's Thursday nights. I feel like Fridays and Saturdays and other days of the week, we have a lot going on. And we felt like Thursdays were like, that's a good day for us to have a date night. So first we chose the actual day. Then we have littles at home. And so it was important for us to find someone who could come regularly and make sure that that is already taken care of. So you're not trying to find a babysitter every single week. So we have Miss Tasha, our nanny, who comes on Thursday nights, and it's just a regular occurring thing for us. Another system that was really important for us is actually putting it on the calendar. So just as if, there's so much that's important in our work life and our regular life that we put on the calendar and we don't move it around, right? And so I want you to do that with your date night, to just put it on the calendar as a repeated event. And then every once in a while, there will be things that come up for us on Thursday nights. We might have an event or we're out of town or something happens on a Thursday night. And instead of taking that off the calendar, we just replace it and put it in a different spot. And I think that's super important because that shows that that's a priority to Shane, and that shows that that's a priority to me, and that our relationship is one of those key boulders that do not move out of our weekly calendar. So if you think of, I'm sure you've all heard the vase analogy. I talk about it all the time. that when you put your boulders in first and then your littler rocks and then sand, everything fits. But if you try to put all the other things in a different order, it doesn't fit. And so for us, that boulder of date night is super important. And I can tell that if we're kind of off or things aren't just like our normal Shane and Andrea vibe, oftentimes we either need to do date night and we've gotten off track, or they haven't been as quality of date night. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. This last little part of setting it as a regular schedule is it can be lunch, right? I think especially as entrepreneurs, we have the flexibility. It doesn't have to be taking up the end of your day when you have that time with your kids, or you're tired, or you have other things going on. It could be breakfast or lunch or just random in the middle of the day. But the important part is really putting it on your calendar and making it a regularly occurring event. So that's the first section I wanted to talk about. The second is make it fun. So I think one thing that has been super fun for Shane and I is we take turns who is in charge. So you're both carrying an invisible load, right? Whether it's your business or home or a mix of both or the kids or whatever that might look like. And so I think it's really important to take turns who is in charge of planning it. So Shane and I just take turns each week. Like this week is my turn. And so I just think through, what am I going to do? And what could I make sure that Shane would absolutely love? And I think back to when you're dating and when you're first married, you're always focused on the other person. You're like, how can I impress them? Or how can I just make them feel so important or make them feel seen? And as soon as you turn inward and stop worrying about the other person, they do the same, and it creates this divide. So if you're able to just think of something fun that your spouse would love, they're going to appreciate that so much. And then you can take turns doing that for each other, which I think is a huge part of dating each other. The next little piece of this is we love to make it a surprise. So Shane will plan it or I will plan it, and we don't tell each other till right before or even till we're on the date. So if it's something that, if I'm taking Shane fishing or something, he's not going to be in a suit, right? So we got to make sure that I'll tell him like, okay, be sure to wear this or do this or prep in this way. We need something warm to wear or whatever it is. But that has been so fun because as I'm planning things or as he's planning things, we'll like drop hints for each other or send a text or, hey, I'm so excited for our date tonight or whatever that might be. That has been super fun. This last section, I want to talk to you about some date night ideas. Oftentimes when I'm, meeting with my students or I'm talking to people about their dating life, they will be like, oh, I just don't know what to do. Dinner and a movie seems easy, right? But I want to give you some of these things that you can do to make it way more interesting, but it doesn't need to be expensive and it doesn't need to cost a lot of time either. It can be something that you're super excited about, but that can be really simple. And these are 3 of my favorite date ideas that Shane and I have done that are usually the most inexpensive and simple, and it has made the world of difference. Okay, so this first one is the dollar store date idea. This is so random, but we started doing this a few years ago and it has been so fun. Even my brother-in-law, when he was dating his now wife, his very first date, he's like, guys, what should I do? I really want to impress this girl. I'm like, okay, here's this date idea. And he attributes part of their success to this date idea. Okay. So you go to the dollar store and you're going to choose 10 items without the other person knowing. And you'll go throughout, the store and try to like hide it from your spouse or whatever. And then you check out. Okay. And all of these items will be something that has to do with, it could be an inside joke. It could be something about your spouse that you love about them. It could be something funny that you guys have experienced together, whatever it might be. It's just 10 items that you associate with your spouse. Then you'll go to dessert, go grab some ice cream or hot chocolate or something, and you keep your items hidden until you get there, and then you pull them out of the bag and you're like, this one is because of this, or this one is because made me think of you because of this one time or this story or whatever it might be. And that is like such a simple date idea, but it is so fun to build connection and to just show appreciation for your spouse and being like, this is what I think of you and this is how awesome you are. Or makes me laugh every time I think about it. Okay, so there's the first date idea. The second is, I called it drive deep. So you go grab a swig or your favorite drink and you go on a drive through the mountains and ask each other questions. So I brought this out. This is one of my favorite things. It's called the Best Self deck. And this is the intimacy deck, but they have all sorts of different options for different decks, and they're all questions that you can ask each other. So I pulled out a handful so that I could show you examples, and these could also be questions that you could ask at your next date idea or date night that is hopefully this week. Okay, so there's here are all the topics: relationship, past, life, random, about you, and intimacy. Okay, so here are some of the questions. You can write them down or listen to this later, and you can ask your spouse these questions. So the relationship one is, describe some times or areas in which you find it most difficult to be open and honest with me. There's the first one. Then the one for past is, tell me about the family you imagined creating when you were little. The next one is life. What holiday traditions are important to you that you'd like us to keep going into the future? The random one is, share one thing I've done this week that has made your week better. The about you one is, which couple in our life do you wish to be either more like or nothing like? Explain. And then the last one is intimacy. What was the hardest decision you've ever had to make? So those are some of the examples that, as we've, carried this deck with us in the car or brought it on specific dates, we've had quality conversations just by sparking a few quality questions with this deck. And I have absolutely loved that. So when you're, driving around the mountains, listening to music, whatever you want to do, again, this is so simple, but you can either have these questions or put some into ChatGPT, or you can think of your own, but just having those quality questions really gives you that intimate connection with your spouse that, again, you once had when you first started dating. Okay, the last date idea is a thrift store challenge. So what you want to do is you go to DI or some, Goodwill or something, and choose outfits for each other before going to dinner. And I just think this is so funny because who knows what you're going to find there, and then go to like kind of a nicer restaurant or something that you're like, I would not want to be wearing an embarrassing outfit, and just see how funny and fun that experience will be for you guys to just choose outfits for each other and then go to dinner. So if maybe you make it through these 3 date ideas, and then you're like, what else do I do for date night ideas? You could actually use a date night and just write down anything you would love to do on a date night and do it together and stick it in a jar. And then that's something that you can do to just think of a date night idea. If you're like, oh, how am I going to make this work? You can make it happen that way. If you're still stuck after all of these ideas, I put a full list of things that you could do specifically within Utah in the show notes. The last thing I want to talk to you about today is setting a goal. So oftentimes I say this to my students and my members, that information is not transformation. So even though you've listened to this podcast today, and maybe you've listened to a couple others today, you want to actually take that information and put it in place. Okay, so there's 2 things you can do right now to make sure that this happens. Either have a conversation with your spouse by calling them right now, right after this podcast, or the other thing is just text them, say, hey, I really want to talk about our dating life. Can we put it on the calendar to actually have a conversation about this? And I think it just shows that your intention, that this is important to you, that you want to build your relationship. And it takes it to the next level. So I hope that this episode gave you actionable items that you can actually do right now. So plan the first date. That's all you have to do. And then get it on your schedule so that you can actually make that system of intentional quality date nights a priority for you.